You're not needed, just convenient. The words left her lips so easily, as if they weighed nothing, but when they struck me, they shattered something deep inside. I remember staring across the living room, watching her lean back in her chair with her phone in hand, scrolling, smirking faintly at some message that clearly mattered more than my presence. The room, usually warm with the scent of dinner, felt like ice pressing against my skin. My chest tightened, and my breath caught, as though the air itself had been stolen from me. I had spent years believing I was her partner, her anchor, her safe place. Every bill paid, every dream of hers supported, every burden I carried without complaint. I thought it meant something. I worked late hours, skipped nights out with friends, and set aside my own ambitions because building her world felt like building ours. And yet, sitting across from her that night, I realized she hadn't seen me as a husband. No, to her, I was just a wallet, a driver, a background figure in the spotlight of her glamorous life. The cruelty of it wasn't in the words alone, but in the way she delivered them. She didn't even look up from her phone when she said it. She forked a piece of food into her mouth, barely chewing before tossing the words out like scraps on the floor. Casual, thoughtless, as if I wasn't flesh and blood, but some machine she could unplug when she was done using it. I wanted to scream. To flip the table, to demand she look me in the eye and tell me again that I was disposable. But the rage never made it past my throat. Instead, I sat in silence, hands folded tightly in my lap, nails biting into my palm. I wondered how long. She had thought this way. From the very beginning? Or had she slowly convinced herself I was nothing more than the furniture in her house, useful but invisible? Her laugh rang out suddenly, light and hollow, at something on her screen. Not at me, not with me, just near me. And in that moment, I realized something darker than the words she'd spoken. I had become a stranger in my own marriage, a placeholder, in a life I had built for both of us. The silence I gave her that night wasn't weakness. It was a seed. A quiet, deliberate pause before the storm I knew would come. Because if I was nothing more than convenience to her, then convenience was about to end. If I was just convenience, then she was about to learn the cost of losing it. I met her on a night that should have been ordinary, but somehow became the start of everything I thought I ever wanted. She walked into the room with that magnetic confidence, every eye turning toward her as if she were the only person who mattered. She laughed, she teased, she promised me forever with just the way. She held my gaze. I believed her completely. She said things like, "You make me feel safe, and I've never met anyone who cares like you do." To a man who had always carried the weight of others quietly, those words felt like oxygen. Looking back, the red flags had been there from the start. She admired designer shoes more than simple flowers, talked about dream vacations rather than shared struggles. She bragged about what her life should look like, about what she deserved. But I mistook her hunger for status as ambition. I thought I was falling in love with a woman who dreamed big. In truth, I was just signing up to be the one who financed those dreams. I worked overtime, dragging myself home long after midnight, just so she could swipe her card without hesitation. Friends slowly disappeared from my life because I never had time for them anymore. Hobbies, those small joys that made me feel alive, were abandoned one by one. Everything funneled into her. Her comfort, her lifestyle, her happiness. I convinced myself it was what love demanded, and to the outside world, we looked perfect. Social media painted us as the golden couple, her in elegant dresses, me by her side in pressed shirts, smiling like life was flawless. People would say, "You're so lucky she's stunning," and I'd nod, even though behind closed doors, the truth was suffocating. Because in private, she didn't speak to me like a husband. She spoke to me like an employee. When she was annoyed, her words cut deeper than knives. "You're lucky. I settled for you." Or the one that always hollowed me out. Other men would kill to have me. She said it casually, as though she was doing me a favor by staying. For years I accepted it. For years I told myself she just had high standards, that I needed to try harder. But sitting in that same house now, replaying her latest cruelty, "You're not needed, just convenient. I finally saw the truth I had ignored. Those words echoed like a curse, reminding me that everything I had given wasn't love to her. It was just service, comfort, a throne I built for a queen who never once cared for the man kneeling at her feet. It happened late one night when I reached for her hand across the couch, searching for even the smallest connection. She pulled away as if my touch were an inconvenience, eyes still glued to the glow of her phone. I asked softly, "Do you even see me anymore?" She sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered, "Don't start." I tried again, my voice cracking, telling her I missed her, that we hadn't been close in weeks. She snapped back with ice in her tone, "You always want something. I'm not here to fill your emptiness." The rejection cut, but what came next burned deeper. She looked up at me with that practiced smirk and said, "Face it, you'll never be enough. Do you know the kind of men who chase me? Men with real money, men who could give me the life I deserve. Not this." Her hand gestured vaguely at the room, at me, as if all I had given was nothing more than scraps. I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because something inside me cracked in a way words couldn't mend. My chest was tight, my throat dry, but beneath the hurt, there was a new, cold clarity forming. That night, while she slept peacefully in the bed I paid for, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the numbers that had ruled our lives. The rent, covered by me. Utilities, all withdrawn from my account. Her endless shopping, salon visits, the designer purses she flaunted, every single one traced back to my name. Even her car, the one she bragged about to her friends, was mine. Line by line, I saw it clearly. She hadn't married me. She had married convenience, and I was the fool who kept it alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt powerful. If she truly believed I was nothing but convenience, then convenience was something I could take away. Quietly, completely. As the clock ticked past midnight, I closed my laptop and whispered into the empty room, almost like a vow. Tomorrow she'd wake up in a different world, one without my name holding it together. The next morning, my resolve felt sharper than any blade. While she hummed in the shower, getting ready for another day of indulgence, I sat at the table with my laptop and phone, each click and call cutting invisible threads that had kept her world suspended. First, I called the bank. Her credit cards, the ones she loved to flash when shopping, were frozen with a few quiet words. The accounts were separated, funds shifted into one solely under my name. The banker on the other end confirmed politely, unaware he was dismantling the illusion of her independence. Next was the landlord. The lease, as I already knew, was in my name only. A simple confirmation call was all it took to secure the fact that this apartment was mine. Not ours. Mine. By the time she stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in her silk robe, I had also called the insurance company. Her car, in my name. The policy, paid by my card. With one stroke of a pen, she had no coverage without me. I moved. With deliberate calm, almost mechanical, as if every action was rehearsed. The anger I once felt had burned away, leaving something colder. Precision. By the time she left the apartment for her lunch plans, her empire had already begun to crumble, though she didn't know it yet. Before heading out myself, I took a scrap of paper and wrote the only words she needed to read. Convenience has expired. I placed it neatly on the kitchen counter where her eyes would land the moment she walked in. No anger, no pleading, just the truth, simple and sharp. I left early for work, my heart steady, waiting for the fallout. Hours passed. At first, silence. Then, around noon, the storm began. My phone lit up in a frenzy, missed calls, one after another. Messages poured in, her words jumping between fury and desperation. "What did you do?" turned into "You're pathetic." Then, "Fix this now," followed by a desperate, "Please, we can talk." By the time I got home, there were dozens of missed calls, messages dripping with rage, insults stacked on top of empty threats. And then, suddenly, silence. That silence was louder than any scream. Her downfall didn't arrive with a crash. It came in slow, humiliating waves. The first cracks showed when her circle of friends, the ones she flaunted me to, suddenly stopped inviting her out. No more fancy dinners, no more weekend shopping trips. When the bill landed at the table and her card was declined, the whispers started. She blamed the machine, blamed the bank, but people notice when it happens more than once. The champagne flutes at those high-end boutiques no longer appeared when she walked in. Instead of warm greetings, she got suspicious glances, as if they already knew her status had changed. Then came the creditors. Phone calls at all hours, letters piling up on the counter, urgent in red ink. Every bag, every pair of heels, every night of indulgence. It was all stacked against her now. Without me as her silent safety net, the glitter of her life dulled fast, and when the facade finally crumbled, she came crawling back with her best performance yet. Her voice softened, her eyes glistened with crocodile tears, and her hands reached for mine as if she had suddenly remembered what love was. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "We can fix this. I can be better." For a moment, the part of me that once loved her stirred, but then I remembered every word she'd thrown like a dagger. "You're not needed, just convenient." And I stayed cold. Her tears rolled down her cheeks, but to me they looked like nothing more than spilled lies. While her world shrank, mine began to expand again. I cooked for myself, meals that filled the apartment with warmth I hadn't felt in years. I called up old friends I had neglected, and one by one, laughter returned to my evenings. Nights that were once spent lying awake in quiet misery turned into peaceful sleep. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting my own life. Weeks slipped by. She vanished from my day-to-day, leaving behind only the echoes of her absence. But then, a month later, fate decided to put her back in front of me. And when I saw her, she wasn't the woman I had left behind. Wasn't looking for her that day. I had stopped thinking about where she might be or what her life had become. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, and as I passed a small cafe on the corner, my eyes caught a figure bent over a table, rag in hand. For a moment I didn't recognize her. The woman who once paraded in designer heels and silk dresses was now pale, her hair dull and messy, her clothes worn thin. She looked smaller somehow, as though the weight of the world had pressed her down into someone unrecognizable. She straightened up to greet a customer, forcing a smile, but when her eyes flicked to the window and found mine, her face froze. For the first time, she didn't hold herself like a queen. She looked like a child caught in the middle of a lie. She quickly looked away, as if the sight of me was salt on an open wound. I should have felt pity. Once I might have rushed in, taken her hand, told her everything would be all right. But all I felt was a cold clarity, a sense of balance restored. This was the woman who told me I was nothing more than convenience. And now here she was, stripped of the throne I built for her. A flash of satisfaction stirred in me, but I didn't let it linger long. I simply stood there, calm, watching her with the detachment of someone who has already turned the page. She had once treated me as a placeholder, a service, a man she could dismiss at will. Now she knew the truth that had taken me too long to see. Convenience is never loyal, and true love doesn't need receipts. When our eyes met again, hers were wet, begging silently for something, help, forgiveness, maybe even recognition. I gave her none of it. I only nodded once, a quiet farewell, and turned away. And just like that, I walked out of the cafe, leaving her behind with the tables she wiped instead of the crown she once wore. It didn't take long after that cafe encounter for her to reach out again. This time there was no arrogance in her voice, no sly manipulation. Her call came late at night, her tone cracked and hollow. She confessed everything in a rush, as though the words themselves were too heavy to carry any longer. Her friends, the ones who cheered her on during champagne dinners, had vanished the moment her money dried up. The apartment she once filled with luxury was slipping through her fingers. Rent notices piled on the counter like vultures circling. Even her own family, the people she thought would always take her side, had grown tired of her endless demands. She was alone, stripped of every safety net. "Please," she whispered through the phone, her voice trembling. "Just one chance. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I can change. I can be better. Don't leave me like this." For a moment, silence stretched between us. I thought of the years I gave, the sacrifices I made, the way she had reduced me to nothing more than a shadow behind her spotlight. I thought of her words, sharp and unforgettable. "You're not needed, just convenient." And the answer came as naturally as breathing. "You were right," I said, my voice steady. "I was just convenient." And I ended it. On the other end, I heard her break. A sob, raw and unguarded, filled the line. But I didn't flinch, didn't soften. I let the silence fall heavy between us until I finally hung up, leaving her drowning in the emptiness she had built for herself. Weeks later, I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances. She had started seeing another man, a wealthy one, clinging to him as if he were her last chance at survival. But convenience never lasts forever. It wasn't long before he too saw through her, discarding her without hesitation. And once again she was left with nothing. No husband, no friends, no family, no crown. And I was lighter than I had ever been. Time has a way of proving what words alone cannot. As months passed, my life unfolded in ways I never thought possible. When I was trapped beneath her shadow. Work, once just an endless grind to keep her satisfied, began to feel different, lighter, purposeful. I poured my energy into it, not because I had to, but because I finally wanted to. The promotion came, quietly, a recognition of years I had buried under someone else's expectations. For the first time, success felt like mine, untouched by anyone's greed. My health followed suit. The stress that had once kept me awake at night, eating away at me like acid, began to dissolve. I started running again, rediscovering the rhythm of my breath, the way the morning air felt against my skin. I cooked meals that nourished me instead of draining my wallet. I reconnected with people who had always cared, the ones I had once pushed aside in the name of keeping her world afloat. Laughter returned to my days like an old friend I thought I'd lost forever. And her? She faded into the background, a ghost haunting the life she once wore like a crown. The last I heard, she was living in a small, rented room, bouncing between jobs, her name no longer whispered with envy, but with pity. The friends who once circled her like moths to a flame had long since flown elsewhere. Her family, tired, embarrassed, unwilling to carry her, kept their distance. She was left with nothing but the echo of her own words. I thought often about that night, the one where she leaned back so casually, scrolling her phone, and told me I wasn't needed, just convenient. It had been the cruelest thing anyone had ever said to me. But in hindsight, it was also her confession. She had revealed the truth of what I meant to her. And when someone tells you what you mean to them, you should believe them. She said I wasn't needed. And now, she knows exactly what it feels like to not be needed. The irony is sharp, almost poetic. The night she called me convenient was the night she unknowingly ended her own comfort.